In 1974, he was TV's golden boy, but then Fonzie happened. What followed was a brutal power struggle that would change TV forever, with stories of stolen dignity, friendships that were pushed to the limit, and now Henry Winkler tells the heartbreaking truth about why Happy Days' original star quit and the terrible price everyone paid for fame. Henry W.A. was born on October 30, 1945, in Manhattan, New York City. His parents, Illa and Harry Winkler, were German Jews who had fled Nazi Germany just a few years before they settled on. Henry grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. His father was successful in the lumber business, which meant the family had money, but life at home was hard. Henry's parents were strict and often mean because of their problems in Germany. They even called him a dumb dog in German, which hurt him a lot and stuck with him for years. Henry had a hard time in school because he had trouble reading and writing, but no one knew he had dyslexia, so his teachers and parents thought he was lazy or just not trying hard enough. This made him feel bad. He was sad and lonely until he was 13 years old and watched the movie West Side Story. It lit a spark in him and he fell in love with acting and started to dream of a different kind of life. His bar mitzvah was another big event in his life. Reading Hebrew was very hard for him, but he memorized everything and did a great job for the first time. He felt proud of himself, which gave him a little confidence. Even though school was still hard for him as a teenager, he found comfort in music by Bob Dylan and the Beatles. Aside from acting, Henry made a brave choice when he was 18 years old. He wanted to go to Emerson College in Boston, even though his parents didn't support his dream. Leaving New York for Boston gave him a fresh start, but college was still hard for him because he had trouble reading, but he worked through it. His theater professors encouraged him, and for the first time he felt like he belonged somewhere. After graduating in 1967, Henry decided to go even further. Yale's School of Drama is one of the best acting schools in the world, and Henry applied there. The application process was tough, but he impressed them with his charm and talent, and he was accepted. He started studying there later that year. Yale was a whole new challenge. Acting was fun, but learning scripts and reading hard plays was a nightmare. Henry had to come up with creative ways to remember lines, and he worked extra hard and relied on his natural talent to get through it. He acted in big productions like By the time he graduated from Yale in 1970, he was ready to take on the world. But life after Yale wasn't easy. Henry moved back to New York and had a hard time finding acting jobs. He did whatever he could find, even commercials. In 1 year, he was in 42 different ads, which helped him pay the bills and boost his confidence. He also did small roles in theater productions, like a role in 40 Carats on Broadway that got him noticed. In 1973, Henry got a small part in the movie The Lords of Flatbush. At the same time, he had small parts in a few TV shows. These experiences were just enough to get the attention of casting agents in Hollywood later that year. Henry got a call about a new TV show called Happy Days, which was set in the 1950s and was about a family in Milwaukee. At first, he auditioned for a smaller part, but the producers asked him to try out for a role as Arthur the Fonzarelli. That's when everything changed. When Happy Days premiered on January 15, 1974, Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, wasn't supposed to be a big deal. His character, Arthur Fonzarelli, was just supposed to be a tough guy from the neighborhood to balance out Richie Cunningham, who was the show's nice main character. Fonzie barely showed up in the first season, appearing in only 16 of the 24 episodes, and often for only a few moments. He was written as a high school dropout whose father had left him when he was 3 years old and raised by his grandmother. Henry Winkler wasn't the first choice for the part. Producers first considered Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees, but when Winkler auditioned, he impressed everyone by making up a now-famous mirror scene. At the time, Winkler was 28 years old, unknown, and eager to prove himself. He got the part and started giving Fonzie a special quality that no one saw coming at first. The show kept Fonzie's tough guy image, but small moments hinted at. In the episode Guess Who's Coming to Christmas, Fonzie spent the holidays with the Cunninghams because he was lonely. Viewers loved this mix of toughness and vulnerability, and it started to change how the show used his character. Not everyone at ABC liked Fonzie at first. Executives were worried that his greaser image might make him seem like a bad influence, so they made him wear a green windbreaker instead of a leather jacket when he wasn't near his motorcycle. To get around the rule, the writers made sure that Fonzie's motorcycle was in as many scenes as possible, even if they didn't make sense. As Fonzie's popularity grew, ABC loosened the rules, and by the second season, the leather jacket became a permanent part of his look. As Fonzie's popularity grew, he started to take over the show, and his catchphrases like "I" and "sit on it" became everyday language. People loved how he could fix anything with a simple tap, like hitting a jukebox to make it play. Kids looked up to him. By the second season, Fonzie wasn't just a supporting character, he was a star. His fame went beyond the show. His face was on lunchboxes, posters, and toys, and by 1976, Fonzie merchandise was making millions of dollars, even in Japan. Fonzie was so popular that a poll in 1977 named him more popular than the Emperor of Japan. Politicians even tried to link themselves to Fonzie in order to win over voters. Henry Winkler, who played Fonzie, became one of the... All of this attention made things worse for Ron Howard, who played Richie. Howard had been the main character, but as Fonzie became more popular, Richie's role felt smaller. Howard later said it was frustrating, but he never blamed Winkler for it. At one point, ABC wanted to change the name of the show to Fonzie's Happy Days, which made everyone angry. Winkler spoke out against the idea, saying it would be unfair to the rest of the cast, including Ron Howard. Creator Gary Marshall sided with the cast and wouldn't let the network change the name. In the end, they gave Winkler equal billing in the opening credits as the other actors. Despite the tension, the cast worked hard to keep the show fun and supportive. Winkler even shared the spotlight when he won a Golden Globe for his role, insisting that the whole cast come up on stage with him. The decision to keep Happy Days as an ensemble show paid off. It ran for 11 seasons and became one of the most loved. After Happy Days ended in 1984, Henry Winkler's life took a bad turn. For 11 seasons, he played Fonzie, the cool, confident guy that everyone loved. The role was so well known that people all over the world recognized Winkler, but being so well known as Fonzie made it hard for him to get jobs as anyone else. He said, "I couldn't get hired for 8 or 9 years because I was the ass." But Winkler didn't give up. He decided to try something new, and in 1988, he directed his first movie, Memories of Me. It wasn't a huge hit, but it was a big step forward for him. He also started producing by taking charge of projects, which helped him build a new part of his career. In 1993, he directed another movie called Cop and a Half with Burt Reynolds. These roles helped him stop being just the first choice. Winkler still feels bad about turning down the part of Danny Zuko in Grease, which was offered to him in 1977 while he was still playing Fonzie. The character Danny was a lot like a cool guy from... Winkler said no because he didn't want to play the same kind of role again, but John Travolta took the part, and Grease was a huge hit. Winkler later joked, "I went home and had orange juice," while Travolta went home and bought a plane, even though he felt bad about turning down the part. Winkler later admitted that Travolta was perfect for the part. A big turning point came when he co-created the TV show MacGyver. The show about a secret agent who could solve problems with everyday items became a huge hit and ran for... Producing gave Winkler a new way to succeed in Hollywood and helped him show that he was more than just an actor. Years later, Winkler went back to acting and found a whole new audience when he played Barry Zucker Korn, a bad but funny lawyer on the show Arrested Development. The role was very different from Fonzie, and people loved seeing him in a new light. One joke on the show even made fun of the famous Happy Days shark jumping scene, which Winkler didn't mind laughing at. It was May 7th, 1977, and Henry Winkler was 31 years old when he learned he had dyslexia. This set a new high point in his acting career as he played Gene Keno, an acting teacher helping a hitman change his life. The role was emotional, funny, and had a lot of depth. At 72 years old, Winkler won his first Emmy Award for his performance, 42 years after being nominated for an Emmy for Happy Days. This shows that it's never too late to reach new heights. Winkler finally understood why school had always been so hard when he and his wife Stacy took Jed's struggling student to see a specialist. The doctor described symptoms that Winkler recognized as being very similar to those of his own reading and writing problems. For the first time, he realized that his reading and writing problems weren't because he was lazy or stupid. His brain just worked differently. This realization made W.I. feel a mix of emotions. He was relieved because he knew what had been wrong the whole time, but he was also angry because he thought he was. He was relieved and angry at the same time. He said, "I felt relief and rage. Relief because there was a name for it, and rage because I had been treated so unfairly." His school years were hard at MC Burney School in New York City. He had terrible grades, 2.2 GPA, and was in the bottom 3% of his class. People thought he wasn't trying hard, but the truth was that no one understood his learning problems. After being diagnosed with dyslexia, Winkler started talking about it and became an advocate for early testing. He thought that if he had been diagnosed as a child, school would have been very different and he could have avoided thousands of hours of struggling and feeling bad about himself. But Winkler didn't let that stop him. He found ways to adapt in his acting career. For example, he learned lines by listening to them and repeating them out loud. This helped him do well even though it was hard for him to read scripts. Many people have dyslexia, and Winkler's story shows how important it is to get help for them. Studies show that about 20% of people may have dyslexia, but many are never diagnosed. Winkler started telling his story to students by visiting schools and encouraging kids not to give up. By 2025, he had talked to over 250,000 students about how to deal with problems and find their own strengths. Another important part of Winkler's life is his marriage to Stacy Weitzman. They met on August 23, 1976, when Winkler went into Stacy's Los Angeles clothing store to buy a sport coat and left with Stacy's. When she gave him her phone number, he said he knew right away she was the one. 2 weeks later, they went on their first date to see a movie, and their connection only grew stronger. Stacy had a young son named Jed from her previous marriage, and Winkler was happy to become his stepfather. They got married on May 1st, 1978, in a small private ceremony with only 30 guests. They had 2 more children, Zoe on September 30, 1983, and Max on August 18, 1983. Raising a blended family wasn't always easy, but Winkler and Stacy did their best. As a team, they overcame problems like Jed's dyslexia, which led to Winkler's own learning disability. They didn't let it get to them, though. They became strong advocates for helping kids with dyslexia. The Winklers made a warm and loving home. Their house was always open to friends and family, and it became a gathering place for many young actors in Hollywood. They made family time a priority by setting rules like no work on the weekends so they could focus on being together, and they started having Sunday dinners a tradition. Their marriage has lasted more than 47 years, which is unusual in Hollywood. They've been through hard times together, like Stacy's battle with breast cancer in 2001, but their bond has only grown stronger. In 2023, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary by renewing their vows in a small ceremony at home. Their love and commitment are an inspiration to many. Winkler's struggles with dyslexia led him to an unexpected new career as a children's book author. In 2003, Winkler's agent suggested that he write a book about his life. At first, he laughed and said, "I'm dyslexic, how can I write a book?" But he realized that his story could help other kids like him, so he teamed up with experienced author Lynn Oliver and made up a character based on himself called Hank Zipser. The first book in the series, Niagara Falls or Does It, came out on May 14, 2003, and sold over 1,500 copies in its first year. The series has grown to include 17 books about Hank, a boy with dyslexia. It was Winkler who told Oliver the stories and made sure they were funny, relatable, and easy for kids to read. The Hank Zipser books have been used in schools all over the world to help kids understand dyslexia. In 2014, Winkler started a new series called Here's Hank for younger readers. These books use a special font to make reading easier for kids with learning differences. Winkler went to schools to talk about his books and his life. Henry Winkler began writing his memoir, Being Henry, The FS and Beyond, on October 15, 2022, when he was 77 years old. He worked with co-author James Kaplan to tell his story. It was hard for Winkler to write the book because he was diagnosed with dyslexia at age 31 and couldn't write things down easily. He had to spend hours dictating his memories to Kaplan. They worked on it for 8 months, often late at night, and it was 256 pages long. Winkler relived painful memories from his childhood, and Winkler had to face problems he hadn't thought about in years. One surprising thing he learned was how much he had forgotten about Happy Days. He remembered a time in the 3rd season when producers thought about changing the name of the show to Fonzie's Happy Days. Winkler had always seen himself as part of the team, so this shocked him. He also talked about how hard the show was on him. Some days he worked 15 hours and filmed up to 25 scenes, which left him little time for other things. Winkler admitted that he missed many important events in his children's lives because of his work. The book also talked about what went on behind the scenes of Happy Days. For example, Winkler's relationship with Anson Williams, who played Potsy, wasn't good in 1978. Williams accused Winkler of stealing a funny moment during a live taping, and the two didn't talk to each other off camera for almost 20 years, finally making up at a cast reunion in 1999. Winkler's relationship with Tom Bosley, who played Howard Cunningham, was good, also tense. In 1977, Bosley accused Winkler of overshadowing the rest of the cast because Fonzo was so popular. This caused a tense relationship that lasted the rest of the show. Winkler also talked about how Erin Moran, who played Joni, struggled with drug abuse. He remembered a day in 1982 when she showed up to set drunk, which caused delays. When Scott Baio joined as Chachi, Winkler felt threatened that Baio would steal the show, which made them compete with each other. Winkler also remembered a moment with Donnie Moe, who played Ralph. Many actors who played Mal in 1980 said they felt left out because their character wasn't getting enough attention. Winkler worked to give them better plots, and after that, guest stars on the show brought their own stories. Robin Williams tried out for the part of Moore on October 19, 1977. Winkler remembered how Williams shocked everyone in the room with his made-up alien language. Winkler knew Williams was special right away and told producer Gary Marshall to cast him. Williams became a close friend, and Winkler reassured him during. Williams had a moment when he thought his acting career might not last. Winkler also talked about meeting a nervous Harrison Ford when Ford was just starting out. Ford later thanked Winkler in a handwritten note after becoming a star. Ron Howard's time on Happy Days showed that even success could have a bad side. Howard started the show as the lead character Richie Cunningham on January 15, 1974, but as the show became more popular, Henry Winkler's character Fonzie became a cultural icon. Howard's character became less important as Fonzie became more popular in the mid-1000s, 970s, and he started to feel disrespected by network executives. He talked about this in an interview on The Graham Norton Show in 2021, saying that while Richie was the original lead, the focus shifted to Fonzie, and events and promotions became all about Fonzie. Howard noticed that studio and network heads started treating him badly in business and personally, and the effects of this treatment were clear in the show itself by 1976. From the 1976 to 1977 seasons, Richie's role was shrinking in favor of stories that focused on Fonzie. For example, in the February 1977 episode, Fonzie's Old Lady, Richie had a small part while the story was all about Fonzie. Things got worse in 1978 when ABC executives suggested changing the name of the show to Fonzie's Happy Days. This idea came up in a July meeting, and Howard, who was only 24, was so hurt that he even thought about leaving the show, but Henry Winkler was very against it. The media didn't make things easy. They kept bringing up Howard's smaller role and asking how it felt to be second class on his own show. These constant reminders made him even more angry, but Howard stayed professional and kept giving great performances. For example, in the 1978 episode Richie Almost Dies, his acting was praised for its emotional depth. Still, the stress of feeling undervalued made him think about leaving. Howard quit as a regular cast member on Happy Days during the 1979-1980 season. His last episode, Passages Part 2, aired on May 6, 1980. This was a big change for Howard. Leaving the show was hard, but it gave him the chance to follow his dream of becoming a director. He had started directing with Grand Theft Auto in 1977, but now he could focus on starting a new career. Howard's departure surprised many, including Henry Winkler. The two had become close while working together. Howard called Winkler the day before his last episode aired to break the news. Winkler later said in an interview that he was shocked, but understood Howard's reasoning. Their friendship went beyond Happy Days when Howard directed The Night Shift in 1982, and Winkler visited the set to show his support. Over the years, Winkler often praised Howard in interviews, saying that his success as a director was no surprise to anyone who had worked with him. Henry Winkler and Ron Howard had a special bond. moment at the 2024 Emmy Awards, which were held in Los Angeles and recreated the famous set of Arnold's Drive-In from the show. Everything looked the same as it did back then, including sports pennants, a jukebox, and even the red booths. When Winkler, now 78, and Howard, 70, walked on stage, the crowd went crazy. It was like seeing old friends get back together after decades. Howard said, "This is great," and Winkler replied, "Feels like home." There was a funny moment. When they walked on stage, the Happy Days theme song wasn't playing. Howard joked that other shows had their theme songs played, and Winkler, in character as Fonzie, pretended to hit the jukebox. As soon as he did, the song started playing and the crowd gave them a standing ovation. It was the perfect mix of humor and nostalgia. The night wasn't just about memories, though. Winkler talked about Howard's recent success. Howard had won an Emmy for his Disney Plus documentary about Jim Henson, the creator of Sesame Street. Winkler called Howard his best friend of 50 years and told him how proud he was of him. A lot of work went into making this reunion special. Winkler and Howard practiced their lines and timing many times, and their costumes were a perfect match for their characters, Fonzie and Richie. The production team even found a motorcycle that looked just like the one Fonzie used to ride. It was clear that they wanted everything to feel just right, and it paid off. The reunion had a huge impact, and fans talked about it all over social media. When Days became popular around the world, a lot of people went back to watch old episodes, and streaming services saw a huge rise in viewers. There were even rumors that Winkler and Howard might produce a new season of the show. Their connection wasn't just acting together. Winkler described it as thunderbolt chemistry. And it started the moment they met on the set of Happy Days in 1974. Winkler was 27 years old and Howard was only 18, but they clicked right away. Winkler told a story about how it wasn't just that they were good actors, it seemed like they understood each other perfectly. One story from the third season of the show stood out. Fonzie had to talk to Richie about something personal, and they nailed the scene in one take. The director was so impressed that he said, "We're not doing another take. You can't improve on perfection." This showed how close they were, and even after the show ended, their friendship stayed strong. Howard helped Winkler when he was having a hard time finding new roles. In 1985, Howard invited Winkler to the set of his movie Cocoon. That visit reminded Winkler why he loved acting and gave him the push he needed to try new roles. Winkler also became Howard's godfather and was there for his daughter Bryce Dallas Howard's big moments, like her first school play and later her breakout role in The Village. Bryce said Winkler was like a mentor, always giving her advice and cheering her on when she got married. Ron Howard walked her down the aisle with Winkler, showing how much he meant to her family. Their friendship inspired many people in Hollywood, and a university even started a course using their relationship as an example of how to build lasting creative partnerships. Winkler said it best when he said, "What Ron and I have is rare. It's not just about being co-stars or even friends. It's a connection that defies time, and I'm grateful for it every day."